Hey everyone, and welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are going to be taking a look at some IELTS prep materials that you sent in.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, specifically focused on the speaking test
Okay.
and how to ace the ever-popular history topic.
Right.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. History and standardized tests?
Yeah.
That's
A
gotta get...
recipe for a yawn fest.
Exactly.
Right. Well, that's where you'd be wrong. What we're going to uncover today is how mastering history for the IELTS can actually, unlock a deeper appreciation for history itself.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it's like a secret passageway from test prep to, a genuine love of the past.
Okay, I like the sound of that.
Yeah.
So to set the stage, the IELTS, or International English Language Proficiency Test, is often required for international study or work.
Mm.
And a big part of it is the speaking section, where
Yeah.
they want to see how well you can communicate in English.
It's all about fluency and vocabulary, but not in a, robotic textbook kind of way.
Right.
They want to hear you express your ideas naturally and clearly.
Think of it less like an exam and more like a conversation with someone who's genuinely curious about what you have to say.
Right. And the material you sent over is this episode of the podcast, IELTS Made Easy,
Okay.
which dives into part 1 of the speaking test.
Okay.
They break down the format, which is a quick 4 to 5 minute chat about everyday topics,
Yeah.
like your hobbies, family, work, and you guessed it, history.
Of course.
Yeah.
And one of the key takeaways I found really interesting is this answer, reason, example structure they emphasize.
Okay.
They argue that it's the secret sauce for crafting compelling and well-structured responses.
Okay.
And I have to say, I think they're on to something.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Can you unpack that a bit more? Why is this structure so important, and how does it actually work in practice?
Well, think about it. If someone asks you, do you enjoy learning about history?
Hmm.
You could just say yes and leave it at that.
Right.
But where's the fun in that?
Yeah.
The answer, reason, example framework encourages you to go deeper. Like, instead of just a yes, you could say, yes, I find history fascinating because it helps me understand how the world we live in today came to be.
Exactly. And then you'd follow that up with a specific example. For instance, I was recently reading about ancient Egypt and how their inventions like papyrus and the calendar still have an impact on us today.
Oh, I see what you mean. It's like you're building a little mini argument.
Yeah.
And the example brings it to life and makes it way more memorable.
Right. It shows that you're not just regurgitating facts, but actually engaging with history on a deeper level.
Yeah.
And that's something the IELTS examiners are looking for.
Okay.
That ability to think critically and connect the dots.
Now, the podcast actually uses that exact question.
Oh, wow.
Do you like learning about history?
Okay.
And they give a sample answer that follows this structure.
Okay.
But what I found really interesting is that they go a step further and analyze why they chose the specific example of ancient Egypt.
Yes. They point out that it's something most people have at least some basic knowledge of. So it creates an immediate connection with the listener.
Right.
It's a strategic choice
Yeah.
to make the answer more relatable and engaging.
That's such a good point. It's not just about picking any random historical fact. It's about choosing an example that will resonate with your audience.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got the basic framework down. Now the podcast gets into some really helpful role-playing scenarios where the hosts pretend to be both the examiner and the test taker.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
It's like they're giving you a sneak peek into the actual exam room, which can be super helpful for calming those pre-test jitters.
Totally.
We don't need to go through every single question and answer, but I think it's worth highlighting some of the key takeaways from these role plays.
Totally. What stood out to you? What were some of the things they did really well in these practice responses?
Well, one thing that jumped out at me was their vocabulary.
Okay.
They sprinkle in words like civilizations, historical events, and significant achievements, words that show a real command of the topic.
Right.
And it's not just about using fancy words to impress the examiner.
Right.
It's about choosing language that accurately reflects the complexity and nuance of historical events.
That's a great point. It's about demonstrating that you can go beyond basic vocabulary and express yourself with precision and clarity, which is crucial for effective communication, whether you're talking about history or anything else.
Absolutely. And another thing they do really well is use linking words and phrases to create a smooth, natural flow. Like they'll say things like, for example, on the other hand, or from a different perspective.
Okay.
Which helps to connect their ideas and make the responses sound more polished and coherent.
It's like they're weaving a tapestry of historical knowledge.
Yeah.
And those linking words are the threads that hold it all together.
Exactly. And speaking of weaving stories, They also emphasize the power of personal anecdotes.
Oh.
Like if the question is about a historical figure you admire, instead of just listing their accomplishments,
Mm.
you could share a personal story about how their work inspired you or changed your perspective on something.
Oh, I love that. It's like adding a little bit of your own personal flair to make your response more engaging and memorable.
Yes.
It shows that you're not just memorizing facts, but actually connecting with history on a personal level.
Right. And it can also help to calm your nerves if you're feeling anxious during the test.
Oh, yeah.
Sharing a personal anecdote can ground you in the moment and make the whole experience feel less intimidating.
Now, before we move on to the podcast's ultimate tips for acing part 1,
Okay.
there's one more nugget of wisdom from the role plays that I want to touch on.
Okay.
Paraphrasing.
Paraphrasing, you mean like not just repeating the question back word for word?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They make a really good point about how paraphrasing demonstrates a deeper understanding of the language
Right.
and makes the conversation feel more natural and fluid.
Yeah.
Like instead of saying, yes, I do enjoy learning about history, you could say something like, I find history incredibly fascinating, or I'm always eager to learn more about the past.
It's a subtle shift, but it shows that you're not just passively answering questions,
Yeah.
but actively engaging in the conversation.
Right. It's like you're taking ownership of the language and making it your own, which is a key part of becoming a confident and fluent communicator. Okay, I'm ready to dive into those tips to score band 7+.
All right.
What are the golden nuggets of advice they share for absolutely nailing this part of the test?
Well, they kick things off by emphasizing something we've already touched on.
Okay.
Fluency and natural speech are crucial,
Okay.
and they give some really practical advice on how to achieve that, even if you're feeling a bit nervous.
Like what? Spill the tea. What are their secret weapons for sounding smooth and confident, even if your brain is doing the panic dance?
One of their top tips is to embrace those filler phrases. You know, those little expressions like, that's an interesting question, or let me think about that for a moment.
Right.
They might seem like pointless fluff, but they can actually be really helpful for buying yourself a few seconds to gather your thoughts.
That's so true. I used to think filler phrases were like the enemy of good communication, but now I realize they can actually be strategic pauses that make you sound more natural and less robotic.
Exactly. And the podcast makes a great point about how those pauses can also signal to the listener that you're really taking the time to consider the question thoughtfully, which shows that you're engaged and genuinely interested in the conversation.
It's all about striking that balance between sounding polished and sounding human.
Yeah.
And speaking of sounding polished, they also reiterate the importance of topic-specific vocabulary, right?
Yes.
They suggest some really juicy words to spice up your historical lexicon.
Oh, yeah. They go beyond the basics, suggesting words like eras, turning points, or legacies to describe historical periods and their impact.
Okay.
And it's not just about using big words to sound smart.
Right.
It's about choosing words that accurately capture the nuances of historical events.
Right. It's about demonstrating a deep understanding of the subject matter, not just parroting back a list of fancy terms.
Exactly.
And of course, they circle back to the importance of adding details and examples, which ties in perfectly with that answer, reason, example structure we talked about earlier.
Absolutely. The more specific and vivid your examples, the more engaging and memorable your responses will be. It's like you're painting a picture in the listener's mind, bringing history to life with your words.
And the podcast really drives home the point that this isn't just about acing the IELTS.
Right.
It's about becoming a more effective communicator in general. These skills, structuring your thoughts, using strong vocabulary, adding compelling examples,
Yeah.
they're transferable to any situation where you need to articulate your ideas clearly and persuasively.
I think that's such a valuable takeaway.
Yeah.
We tend to compartmentalize test prep as this isolated skill set, but in reality, it can be a gateway to developing broader communication skills that will serve you well in all areas of life.
It's like that saying, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime.
Right.
Learning how to communicate effectively about history is like learning to fish. It's a skill that will keep on giving.
And they end this segment with a really powerful point: practice, practice, practice. They recommend recording yourself answering practice questions to get a sense of how you sound and identify areas where you can improve. It might feel a bit awkward at first, but it's one of the best ways to refine your speaking skills and build confidence.
I love that tip. It's like having your own personal IELTS coach in your pocket, giving you feedback and helping you polish your delivery. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from the nitty-gritty of the IELTS format to some really actionable tips for leveling up your communication skills. But I think it's worth taking a moment to zoom out and consider the bigger picture here.
I'm with you. We've been so focused on the technical aspects of test prep, but I'm curious to explore the deeper connection between these IELTS skills and a genuine appreciation for history.
Right. Because at the end of the day, history isn't just about dates and names and dry facts.
Yeah.
It's about stories about human experiences, about understanding where we came from and how we got to where we are today.
And I think that's where the real magic of this IELTS prep comes in. By practicing these concise, structured responses, you're actually training your brain to engage with history in a more meaningful way.
Mm.
You're forced to distill complex events and ideas into their most essential elements, which can lead to a deeper understanding and appreciation of the past.
It's like you're learning to see the forest for the trees instead of getting lost in a tangled mess of details.
Right.
And that kind of clarity and focus can be incredibly valuable, not just for the IELTS, but for life in general. So we've been talking about how prepping for the IELTS can actually make you better at talking about history, even if you never take the test.
Wow.
It's like this unexpected side effect of studying for a standardized test.
It's about sharpening those critical thinking skills and learning to articulate your ideas in a clear and compelling way. And that's something that can enrich your life far beyond the confines of an exam room.
Okay, so let's bring it all home. For our listener who's been on this deep dive with us, what are the 2 or 3 biggest takeaways they should hold on to?
Okay.
Whether they're actually prepping for the IELTS or just looking to level up their history game.
Well, first and foremost, that answer reasoned example structure is pure gold.
Yeah.
It's like a magic formula for adding depth and clarity to any conversation about history.
Right.
It forces you to think beyond simple opinions and really delve into the why and the how.
Right. It's about moving from I like this
Yeah.
to I like this because.
Exactly.
And then backing it up with a solid example that brings your point to life.
And speaking of bringing things to life, don't be afraid to get specific.
Mm-hmm.
Those vivid details and personal anecdotes are what make history come alive and hook your listener. Instead of just saying the Renaissance was a time of great change, try saying, imagine strolling through Florence in the 15th century, surrounded by artists and thinkers who were challenging the status quo and sparking a cultural revolution.
Ooh, I can practically hear the lute music and smell the fresh paint. Okay, and what's the third takeaway? What's the final piece of the puzzle for mastering this whole history talking thing?
I'd say it's the dynamic duo of confidence and clarity. The more comfortable you are with the material, the more naturally your fluency and strong vocabulary will shine through. It's like anything else. The more you practice, the more confident you become.
Yeah.
That confidence will make you a more engaging and persuasive communicator.
Love it. Okay, before we let you go, I want to leave our listener with something to ponder. We've talked about how this IELTS prep can actually unlock a deeper appreciation for history itself. So here's the challenge. Think about a historical event or figure that truly fascinates you.
Okay.
Now try applying that answer, reason, example framework to explain why it's so captivating.
I bet you'll not only impress yourself with the depth of your knowledge, but also rediscover the joy of exploring the past. It's like turning on a light bulb in your mind. Suddenly, history becomes this vibrant tapestry of interconnected stories and ideas, and you're holding the key to understanding it all.
Such a great thought to leave us on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. If you're hungry for more, check out our show notes for links to the IELTS podcast we discussed and other episodes you might enjoy. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep those conversations flowing.